Star Fox 64, or Lylat Wars in Europe, is the strongest entry in its franchise. This sci-fi on-rail shooter is still hailed by many. This game was released in 1997 and got a fateful 3DS remake in 2011. For a game that will turn 25 years old this year, the gameplay still holds up great and should still be played by many. Of course, playing a game that was released many years ago brings a challenge. Since its release, we use different televisions and resolutions. Controllers and performance standards have changed. Having multiple releases can get confusing on which one is the better one. And that is where I come in. In this video, I will show you the best way to play Star Fox 64. I will be going over every way you could play this game and rank them from the best way to play to the worst way to play. However, I will not be mentioning the Chinese exclusive iQue release because I don't have it and chances are you don't either. It's quite rare, expensive and Chinese only. I will be comparing the following aspects between every release: video output, graphics, performance and controllers. Oh, and one last note I want to mention. This is my personal opinion. You might disagree with the ranking, which is completely fine. Tell me in the comments what your personal opinion is. I personally did not grow up playing Star Fox. I played it for the first time a few years ago on my Nintendo 64 and played the 3DS remake shortly after. So let's check out the list. Number 1 is the 3DS remake. The fateful 3D remake of Star Fox 64 improves upon the original. The graphics have been redone and they look beautiful. The controls are responsive and the gameplay feels better than ever. The inclusion of gyro controls is a cool idea on paper, but in practice is impractical. Luckily, you can always turn them off whenever you want. Small quality of life features like a health bar on these enemies and the new and easier difficulty is always welcome. Out of the 3DS family, I would recommend playing it on the new 3DS XL or the new 2DS XL, as these models have the biggest screen of them all. Because the game isn't very long and it only takes about an hour to get through, it's the perfect game to play on the road and portability here is very fitting. It's not all rainbows, however. One thing I disliked about the remake was the new voice acting. It's generic and does not have the same personality like the original voices. Uncle Andros! This can be fixed, however, by installing a mod which replaces the voice clips with the original N64 clips. This is possible on a modded 3DS system and on the Citra emulator. This in my opinion makes the remake better than the original, and it's why I think this is the best way to play Star Fox 64. The number 2 spot goes to Dolphin. Dolphin is a GameCube and Wii emulator. This way we can play the Wii Virtual Console release of Star Fox 64 on the PC. Because we are using an emulator, we are able to increase the resolution up to 8K and the visuals look stunning. The possibility for adding texture packs can also increase the graphics of the game. Dolphin is a great emulator and I did not encounter any graphical glitches. Here we also have the possibility to use any controller we can connect to your PC, which means anyone can use any controller they like. To get this to work, simply acquire a legal copy of Star Fox 64 in a WAV file format. Now add the WAV file into Dolphin's game directory path and start playing. The only downside is that the Wii Virtual Console release did not have any rumble pack support. But besides that, it's the best way to play the original game in my opinion. Number 3. Nintendo 64 Emulation. Using Mupen 64 or Project 64, you can emulate Star Fox 64 on your PC or smartphone. The pros are the same as the one from Dolphin that I just talked about, so you might be wondering why this one's below Dolphin. Well, Nintendo 64 emulation is tricky. I encountered a few graphical glitches here and there that were not game breaking, but still more than I did on Dolphin. Despite that, I would say it's pretty much on par with the Dolphin emulator and is a great way to play. Number 4 is the Switch release. Now I will be talking about the most recent release. This subscription-based Switch release actually surprised me. I expected the same experience I got with Ocarina of Time on the Switch, but this game looked great. There was no notable lag, and it even included rumble support. Because it's on a Switch, it's also a great way to play Star Fox portably. I personally used the Nintendo Pro controller, which is a great controller, but you can also use the Nintendo 64 controller for the Switch for a more authentic feel, which is an awesome option if you can get your hands on one at least. Number 5 is the Wii U release. This release also surprised me. I know that the Wii U Nintendo 64 Virtual Console titles have a bad rep. In my video where I talked about the best way to play Ocarina of Time, I gave it the lowest rank. This port is actually pretty good. The visuals still have the dark filter over it, but it doesn't really bother me here, because most of the game is dark and the input lag is not really noticeable. There is rumble support, which is always welcome. This game is rendered at 1080p and looks crispy, so overall, a solid release by Nintendo. Number 6 is Citra, the 3DS emulator. After tinkering with the Citra emulator settings, I got the game working and it ran pretty well. All the gameplay happens on a top screen, so it translates well to one monitor. I had a lot of fun playing this way, but the emulation is not there yet, sadly. There are graphical errors and one level even looked like this. Yeah, I still beat a level like this, but it's not ideal, obviously. I feel like this could be the best way to play in the future once everything gets ironed out, but for now it's definitely not yet there. If you're still curious and want to play this way, you can see the settings I used to get this to work. Also note that if you're using a controller with a joystick, you have to use the Use Analog Stick for the circle pad instead of just inputting every direction. Number 7 is the Wii Virtual Console release. The Wii Virtual Console has a good reputation. The emulation is good, is upscaled to 480p instead of the original 240p the game was in on a Nintendo 64, and the colors are good. The reason this release is so on the list is because it's not in HD and it supports no rumble. Despite this, I still had a ton of fun playing. For video output, I recommend using a component cable that is plugged into a good upscaler, like an OSSC. For a controller, I recommend using a GameCube Wavebird controller, if your Wii has the ports at least. Because the Wii eShop has been closed, the only way to install this game is to mod your Wii. Modding your Wii is a very easy process these days. All you have to do is connect to the internet and change the DNS address to a specific set address you can find in the description. After that, you can go to agreement/contact and wait on this screen. Now you can simply mod your Wii and access the homebrew channel. After this, just load an SD card with a WAD manager and a legally obtained WAD file. Just install and start playing. Last but not least is the Nintendo 64 original release. Yes, I know, the Nintendo 64 is the original way to play this game, but it's objectively the worst way to play. The video output is just 240p and there is a lot of slowdown throughout the game. I do think that using the Nintendo 64 controller plus the rumble pack feels great. And if you were to play this way, playing it on a CRT using an S-Video cable still looks good. If you want to play a Nintendo 64 on a newer screen, you can buy an HDMI line doubler like these. Modding your for better output is also a possibility. An RGB mod to get SCART output makes the game look even better on a CRT and it's cheap to install. Installing an HDMI mod, however, is the best you can do, but it's very expensive. If you really want to have the most authentic experience, play this way. There's nothing wrong with it. The lower resolution and frame drops on some parts are not game breaking and you will still have a good time. These were all the ways to play Star Fox 64. I left out Samu and Yuzu because they would perform the same as their console because they are already in HD. If you have any suggestions for another game, please let me know. Thank you for watching and subscribing.